Today, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. E.J. Thomas is known to many of you as your sixth-term House of Representatives from the north of Columbus. To others, as the Director of Operations for the Ohio National Guard 5,000-plus member force, or as past Chairman of the Ohio Unemployment Review Commission. More will recognize him as a Capital University board member, or maybe Chief of the Columbus Affordable Housing Alliance, or a member of the New Albany Architectural Review Board, or as a member of the Ford Tri-Motor Heritage Foundation up in Port Clinton. You might recall him from the Zoo Board or from the Symphony Board, where he helped initiate the Picnic with the Pops program. And you're in contact with these volunteers even at the annual July BIA Parade of Homes, where they are the staff, which in turn helps fund the Habitat mission. Today, EJ will discuss the Habitat for Humanity-MidOhio, where he has been chief executive for over 10 years. With 20-plus houses a year to be constructed and 2 restore locations, which generated over $1.7 million in revenue last year, his plate is full. Even so, he has found time to chair its state support organization and to serve elected positions on the National Council and to advise its international board. He has also chaired its advocacy and its Veterans Initiative committees. Rotarians, Mr. E.J. Thomas.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, thank you very much. Well, we're here to talk a little bit about Habitat for Humanity-MidOhio. We've got some slides here. I understand we're on a tight time schedule. I can see that you run a tight ship here, Madam President, so we'll stay on track and allow some time for some questions later. Here's our mission statement. Ours is an effort to inspire, build, empower, and develop. Those are our 4 pillars. We serve 3 counties. 11 years ago when I started, we were in 1 county, which was just Franklin. We were called Greater Columbus at that time. And since then, we've picked up Licking and Madison counties, so we thought a name change was probably in order, and so we are now Mid-Ohio. Ours is a hand up, not a handout, and I want you to remember that. One of the things a lot of people don't know is that we're not just here in the United States. We do over 100,000 housing solutions all throughout the world, working in about 70 countries. In fact, only about 10% of all the housing production that we accomplish for Habitat International is done here in the United States. Since '87, we've put more than 350 folks into homes. I have to tell you that it's the Presbyterian Church up on High Street. I can't think of the name of it. Overbrook Presbyterian years ago started with the quilt club and would make a quilt for each of our home, and we'd give it to it during the dedication. And at the time, they were doing a couple, 3 houses a year. Well, now when we're up to 20 houses a year, we've really got them in full swing. They haven't unionized, so we're still doing okay. Several misconceptions are out there. One is that we give houses away, especially during the time when I think of the show's name was Extreme Makeover, was getting a lot of play. It really added to our misconception that we give houses away just like they did. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. We don't give houses away. Next. Our families have to qualify. They come and they put in sweat equity. They learn how to take care of their home. We take them through financial literacy classes. They pay a mortgage at the end of the day, just like you and I do. Now, it's at 0%, so they can afford it, because we're talking about folks that are in the 30 to 60% average area income range, which means that if you're a family of 4 in Franklin County, that's about $32,500 to raise a family on. And we provide them an opportunity to own a home, gain equity during the time that they're giving us that check every month. And by the way, more than half of our homeowners are paying less for their mortgage than what they were paying for substandard housing. I love this slide. Any of you here read Dr. Seuss books to your kids? Sure you did. Probably all of us did. I'm amazed at the number of times people walk up to me and I go, well, now you've got people that are volunteers building these homes, right? Do they like stand up? And they're always very polite about it. But I think in the back of their mind, they're thinking, back up please, I think they're seeing this Dr. Seuss house in the back of their minds. And no, we are developers. Just like any other developer, we have to pull permits. We have to pass all of the inspections in order to get a certificate of occupancy. One of the things I'm really proud of is that we build a very energy efficient home. Those of you that are in the home building business, you know what a HERS rating is. HERS is a third-party organization that comes in that you pay for this test. It's a home energy rating system. And they're looking to see how efficient your home is. The baseline is whatever home at your square footage level. So there's a database out there. Average utilization per utilities is at a level of 100. That's the baseline. So if they come in and do the test and you knock down about a score of 52 or 54, you're getting this. It's like golf. You're doing really well. And so for us, we average between 52 and 56, which means that our homeowners, once they're in their home, are paying just a little more than half of what the average homeowner is in a home that's not constructed the way that we build them for energy efficiency. Well, what does that mean to our homeowners? It means that we're helping them be successful every single month. Because on a month like this, when you've got a $400 heating bill down the street and you're in at $210, those dollars you can use for your family, whether it's for clothing, food, or whatever. So we stay engaged with our families. I talked before about what they have to do in order to qualify for a home. We have folks that will come to us and say that they're interested in a home, and after we go through the requirements, they go, you know what? We'll get back with you. Because it's not easy. If you're a single family, a single parent family, and you're working one job, maybe two, and we tell them that you have to get 250 hours of sweat equity on the way to the home being completed. And by the way, you have to take the Dave Ramsey financial literacy course because we want you to know how to manage your money better. And believe me, there's a lot of folks out there that aren't low income that could take that course and probably benefit from it. And by the way, we're going to take you through a homeowner maintenance class because we want you to know how to do the light-duty maintenance chores on your own home. It is a transformational process that we take these folks through. Do we give houses away? Absolutely not. All right, the three criteria that they need to meet. They have to have a need for shelter. They have to be living in substandard housing now. We determine that with a volunteer committee that goes out using HUD guidelines, and there's a whole list. Lead paint on the walls, asbestos in the house, overcrowding, high crime area, on and on and on. So we run this through a grid and we determine whether or not they're actually living in substandard housing. Second of all, they have to be willing to partner with us. They've got to put in those hours of sweat equity. They have to take those courses and get through them. And third, they have to have an ability to pay. They have to have a job. They've got to be able to write that check every month. And they know that right up front in terms of what that's going to be. We are blessed to have a host of folks and corporations that help us with our goal of building between 18 and 22 homes a year. And I got to point out a couple of folks here in the room. The Weiler family has been outstanding in terms of their help. Bob's sitting up here. We own our building now because Bob and his team gave us some time, went to a meeting with us, if I remember right, at Voorhees, where we had some fun negotiating. Maybe it wasn't fun for you, Bob. It was for us because we came out the way we wanted. But the point is, with his work, we lowered our monthly net by about $3,000 a month, every single month. And we now own the building, and Bob will have that paid off next year. Bob's brother Alan and his wife Bobby have sponsored 6 homes at $100,000 for the last 6 years, and they plan to do another one this year. So we've got folks out here that are very dedicated to the families we serve. So I just wanted to point that out because people ask me, well, what's your limiting factor? Well, it's just like in your businesses. It's no more difficult than the amount of money we raise. We can't build what we can't fund, and since we hold our own mortgages, Now think about this. You know, typically a developer takes out a construction loan, builds the house, sells the house, they go to the closing, the bank says, here's your money, you pay off the construction loan, you start over again. Well, we create and service our own mortgages. So we do this at the closing. So we have to start over again to raise the next $100,000 in order to fund the next house. What does it take to build a home? We've got some of the greatest volunteers. You just can't imagine. Day like today, I guarantee you, we've got sites out there that are humming right along. Volunteers who are part of our Winter Warrior program, who come out between January and March and continue building throughout the winter months. Every home takes about 3,000 hours of volunteer time. Now, go back to your Dr. Seuss house. I know you're thinking about that. Okay, they're in here. The folks are coming in to volunteer. 80% of them have never picked up a hammer, and they're wiring and plumbing. No. Because we're developers, we have to have certified folks that do the plumbing, the heating, the HVAC. So it's all of the other stuff relative to construction that we have done on the house by volunteers. 70,000 hours of volunteer service a year. And one of the most amazing things for me is, you know, if you're living in a low-income world, you're used to being kicked around by payday lenders. Don't get me started on them. People sell you a bill of goods. Our volunteers come and our homeowners come to realize that these folks are coming to help me. And I'm a little gun shy at first because I'm not sure what they want. And what they come to realize is the only thing that the volunteers want is the success of the homeowner. They come every day with a smile on their face, develop relationships. I guarantee you when there are so many of our volunteers that will stand and they tear up when the homeowner gets their key because they've been a part of that process. And some of those relationships last a very long time. When I started, we were just building new houses. We are into neighborhood revitalization now. What does that mean? It's new houses, it's rehabs, it's repairs, and it's helping to bring neighborhoods back that in a more holistic way. When we used to drop in a house years ago, now we're all students of human nature here. Yes, I'm watching the clock. I've got till 12:50, is that correct? Before the bell rings, and I know you've got a big hammer there.
You're fine.
Okay. Imagine that you're in a neighborhood that you've lived in for 20 or 30 years. The neighborhood has slipped, but you hear about the fact that people are going to try to bring it back. There's a vacant lot over there because the house that was there was condemned and torn down. And here comes Habitat for Humanity. Do-do-do. They're bringing their trucks, they're bringing their construction dirt, they're bringing the noise at 8 o'clock in the morning, and here comes a new family we've never met. I'm a little resentful of the fact that they're getting a brand new house. It's human nature. Does that sound like the right recipe to use to introduce a new family into an area? No, of course not. So what we did several years ago was we said, wait a minute. Why don't we take a different tack here? So now before we start building, we go up and down the street, 4 or 5 houses either side of the intended lot. We ask folks that live there, hey, would you like to have something done to your home here? You know, some light maintenance. You need this, looks like your soffit's coming down here. Long story short is, we're going to do a rock the block on an upcoming Saturday where we're going to have a whole bunch of volunteers that are going to come out. We'll do the assessment here. We'll have the materials with us. Oh, and by the way, there's lunch involved. It's a great way to break the ice is to feed them, right? Totally different reaction to this new family coming into the area because during the Rock the Block event, we have the new family there. So they get a chance to meet this new person. And all at once, the folks that have been living there a long time don't mind the dirt as much. They're a little more accepting of the fact that there's noise at 8 o'clock in the morning. And when the dedication takes place, and I've seen this happen more than once, people who live in the neighborhood come down the street with a welcome gift. Before, we never saw that. So what we're doing is harnessing human nature to help build that goodwill. as somebody who spent a few years in the military, like all of you I know, very appreciative of the service that our men and women have given us. And there are those out there who leave the service and who could qualify for a home under our guidelines. I believe that we are the only affiliate in the country that offers kind of a unique program. For a veteran service member who qualifies in the program, we will knock off $1,000 off of their first mortgage for every year of service they've given us, up to 10 years. Up to 10 years. We have to, okay, we appreciate your 20 years, but it's up to 10 years. Restore. Any of you here been to our restores? All right, thank you for your support, whether you've donated or whether you've come and shopped. And I would tell you, you never know from one day to the next what's coming in the door. And sometimes the stuff that comes in the door, you're going, wait a minute, these old booths that came out of a restaurant on a refresh are never going to sell. So we put $25 on them, and 2 weeks later, they're all gone. Where they go, I have no idea. But they go. And those dollars that the net from those dollars take out almost all of our admin cost, which when we talk to Alan, we say, Alan, you and Bobby's contribution of $100,000 on the house, that all goes to the program of putting the family in the home. There aren't a whole lot of nonprofits that can do that. And that's why you're hearing so much emphasis on social enterprise these days. What can you all do in order to generate dollars that help your mission? We keep about 2,600 tons of usable material out of the landfill every year. If we weren't selling those booths, literally, with busted Naga hide and springs that need replaced, if we weren't selling those for $25 a piece, they would end up in a landfill. And now a word from our sponsor. We have 2 stores, one on Westerville Road and one out west on Wilson Road. So if you are, I'll give you an example. Folks, when they're remodeling their kitchens, and a lot of you have probably done that, if you don't want the cabinets that are in the kitchen, either in the basement or out in the garage, what does the contractor do? He's paying for a dumpster based on volume, right? So what's he want to do? He wants to make that as small as possible. So they get busted into toothpicks. However, if we get a call and can get in the middle of that, and we can say, look, as a homeowner, if you can have these cabinets just pulled off the wall and gently set on the floor of the garage, we can stop by and pick them up. The average set of cabinets will bring anywhere from $300 to $3,000. We had one home in Bexley that tore out some cherry cabinets and the granite that went with it. $10,000 that went out the door. Now, if you go to J Company, that same kitchen would cost you 40 grand. So it's a marvelous way to keep stuff in circulation. Here's our contact information. I know I've kind of gone through this fast. It's more fun for me to answer questions than it is to stand up here and just drone on and on. And you've got a great group here. And there's the first question in the back. Yes, sir.
I was just curious about the finances of it. You mentioned $100,000. Is that the price of the house, the whole house? And what's the payment look like?
The house is priced to the consumer based on their ability to pay. So we look at 27.5% of their income. So if in fact you're at 35% of area median income versus someone at 60%, your payment is going to be different for the same home because it's based on ability to pay. Now, got a lot of bright people in here and you're going, now wait a minute here. If you have a house that's got first mortgage that's based on ability to pay, there's probably a delta between that amount all added up and what the value of the house is. Yes, you're right. And one of the ways we keep people from flipping the house is we put a second mortgage on the home. They don't have to pay for it. There's no interest. But should they decide to bail between the time the closing takes place and 15 years or half the life of the AM, that has to be satisfied. So there's no incentive to go, oh yeah, I can make $30,000 on this thing, go buy a new car. Yes, sir.
Process for finding lots or finding homes. Share that with me.
The question was the process for finding lots and then finding homes. You mean homes to rehab?
For you know,
Right.
tear down or whatever.
Sure. We work very closely with the city of Columbus. They've been great partners. To the extent we can, we like to pick up lots. You'll appreciate this, being in the real estate business, for $500 or $1,000 from the land bank, because that gets us out of the gate. If we go in and we're doing infill, we don't have to put in the infrastructure, which we learned a few years ago that when you do that, you're looking at $30,000 to $40,000 a pop before you start putting that foundation in. So we like the infill lots, and it helps the city. It's a win-win all the way around. And it's the same thing happens with the opportunity to rehab a house. We do get folks that will offer to donate a home in an area where we're working. And one of the things we have to do is evaluate whether or not it's cost effective to rehab it. Because there are times when you're better off just dropping the thing in the ground and starting over. Now, the other consideration if you're going to drop it is you've got remediation for lead paint and asbestos. So there are times when we have to wince and say to a prospective donor, this does not make economic sense. We're delighted that you called us. We really appreciate the fact that you thought of Habitat, but this will not help our mission. In fact, this will take us back. And most people are, well, in fact, I can't think of anybody who wasn't understanding when you share that with them. Yes, sir.
What's your mortgage default rate?
Mortgage default rate is less than the market. Do we have folks that don't make it? Yes, we do. Now, when somebody gets behind, the first thing we do is we are on the phone with them. You know, what's happened in your life? If folks are not trying to game us, we will work with them till the cows come home. We're like kids, all right? You find if you're trying to game us, we'll drop the hammer, and they need to know that. But if you're in the 35% average median income or area median income range, and your car blows a water pump at the wrong time, you're not going to have enough to fix that pump so you can get to work and also pay your mortgage. So we've had, out of our 350 to this point, we've had about 75 that have paid their home off. We've got a plaque up on the wall, and there's a lot of satisfaction for all of our crew, and I am blessed to have just a really, really great team, most of whom have been with me since I started. So, you know how leadership works. You get people that are smarter than you are in all these different disciplines, and you just let them do their thing. So, I know you had a question.
And actually, it was regarding the, how many, if you have any failures in the
Sure, right. It's unfortunate when it happens.
I mean, this is human.
Right. But I would tell you, these families, they kind of keep tabs on each other. And so if you're not keeping tight enough reins on this, it's like, well, maybe I won't pay my mortgage this month. So not all of them, but you do have to be careful along those lines. Sure. Yes, sir.
What's the Jimmy Carter story with Habitat?
Question is, what is the Jimmy Carter story with Habitat? The former president has been a wonderful marketeer for us. He and Rosalind do a work project every other year. Millard Fuller was the attorney who decided that life wasn't as fulfilling as he thought. He was very successful, and he and his wife started Habitat for Humanity with Clarence Jordan down in Americus, Georgia, about 37 years ago. And it just so happened that the president and Millard were good friends. A lot of people would say, well, Jimmy Carter started. No, we shouldn't cut Millard out of the picture because he's really the one that got this off the ground. Yes, ma'am.
I think I heard you say you have this program in the States. Is it overseas or just in the United States?
No, we build in 70 to 75 countries, and in fact, our tithe partner is, we have two, Cote d'Ivoire and Zambia. Now, how does that work? If somebody puts $100,000 in and builds a house, we tithe about $3 to $4 grand because that's what it takes to build a house to their standards in their country. So the same process takes place in terms of the transformative move from poverty into home ownership. The houses are fairly small, they're built with local materials, and they're built to the standards that exist in those countries. And so those are our two partners, and our donors get a twofer. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. The first is, what happens if they don't fulfill the sweat equity? And the other one is, how do people apply for this program?
And you went to journalism school, since you're asking two questions at the same time, right? Question and a follow-up. Now I've gone blank and forgotten both of them. So let's start with one at a time. The question is, if they don't fulfill their sweat equity, well, then they don't get the house. But I would tell you, when people make that investment, it's like anything else. If you give somebody something, they don't necessarily appreciate it. It's human nature. Think about your kids. Oh, I'm not buying that for you. You need to work for it. Well, as adults, we're just kids in bigger clothes, right? The same things that make our brains work, there's no change. When folks make that investment and they develop relationships with those volunteers, they want to finish that house out. And I can't think, Larry, can you think of anyone that we've come across that hasn't made it? We may have someone who slides into the dedication with another 5 hours, but they'll get them done. And more often than not, we have folks that will put in an extra 50 or 100 hours. I want to relate a story about a young lady who just got her home, what, a week and a half ago? Brittany, out in Newark. At the dedication, Brittany has a badge on. She's working for MRDD or one of the public offices. And she said, we always give the opportunity for the homeowner to say some words after we present the key. She went through the thank yous, and then she said, you know, I want to share a story with you. How many here are familiar with Dawes Arboretum? Sure, everybody. She said 3 years ago, she's a single mom, I was unemployed, I had a toddler and a 3-year-old, and I took my boys out to Dawes Arboretum with a blanket one beautiful night, and we laid out under the stars. Said I had my arm around one and the other arm around the other, and we were just lying looking at the stars. She said, all at once I saw a shooting star track across the sky. She said, at that very moment, I made a wish. And that wish was that one day I could have my own home. Now, there was not a dry eye in the house. This young lady in those 3 years went to school, finished her degree, got herself a job, and transformed her life for herself and her boys. And, you know, we as Habitat have the honor of being the catalyst for that change. We couldn't do it for her. We couldn't put her through school. We couldn't make her take those classes, take care of her boys, and get the sweat equity out of the way. She had to do it on her own. So I am very proud of our families when they get through this process, because it is not easy. You can imagine as a single mom trying to do this. Now, your second question, you've probably forgotten, haven't you? Which is why I drone on and on. So, shh. I told you we'd have some fun at this. Okay. Our families come to us a variety of ways. They'll sometimes see us on the website. Lisa has, she holds a forum every other month where interested folks can come in and make application, and we get flyers out to area churches and things so that people know that it's going to occur. So we try to get the word out as best we can. And Larry here helps us a lot with social media. So was I responsive to your 8 questions? Okay, all right, thanks. Yes, sir.
EJ, of all the things that you've done in your lifetime, work-wise, would this fall in the top 3 that make you the happiest?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have been very blessed in my life to do things that I have loved, and some of them came out of the blue and I wasn't expecting them. Flying with the military, it was, I miss it every day. Being in the legislature, that was great until term limits bonked us in the head. But I would tell you, working with these families, You know, because in the legislature, you're at 30,000 feet. You're working on stuff, and you see things from a totally different perspective. And you come out of there going, yeah, I understand that. Well, you don't understand squat until you get in the trenches and start working with some of these families who you see have had a really tough time of it and who are trying their best to bring themselves up. So, yes, Habitat certainly ranks in that top 3.
How do you source volunteers?
A lot of it is word of mouth. We have area churches that provide us volunteers. We call them adopt-a-house groups, where they will, as a consortium of churches, come together and supply a portion of the funding and a lot of the volunteers. The website is very helpful. And when you're just out and about, when folks, I would say word of mouth is probably the best way that we get volunteers. One of the things we do is we try to make folks comfortable right up front. Again, 80% of our folks that come out to volunteer have never done any construction work on a house. Well, if you're a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, and you're at the top of your game in your career, you probably don't like being a dummy on a learning curve. Is that fair? I mean, almost unconsciously, you don't like to get into something you don't know what you're doing. So we try to make it comfortable, let them know, look, we walk this through. We have crew leads that are very good about taking a particular task that they're going to do on a day, and by the end of the day, you're going to know how to do it. You can go down to Lowe's and pick up your stuff and go home and do that job. And folks really seem to like that. So it's a fun experience. We try to make it as fun as possible. Why? Human nature says if you're not having a good time, you're probably not going to be coming back. The next time we call, you're going to say, I'm sorry, I have laundry to do. And so we won't see you again. So, does that answer your question? Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Studer.
I just want you to know that on our Service Above Self project, one of our goals is to get more of our high school teams' community service projects more closely aligned with community organizations over time. I went to several community organizations this past year to say, hey, would you be willing to consider working with a high school team? I went to EJ, it was one of the very first, and explained briefly what we were doing, and his answer was, absolutely. So I think by next year we'll have at least 1 or 2 high school teams somehow working with Habitat, so I want you to know that.
Well, thank you, Rick, and as I told you before lunch, check's in the mail. Well, and you know, that brings up a good point. People will say, well, how old do you have to be in order to go out and work on a Habitat home? For insurance purposes, we need them to be 16 years old. Now, we can have folks working in the restores that are, I think, from 14 on. So for those kids, we do a lot of work with area schools already. Graham School is one where you've got young people who come from a disadvantaged background, and they have not been taught, nor have they developed those skill sets that you're going to need to be able to compete in the workforce as it relates not so much with what you've learned in school, but how you comport yourself when you're trying to get a job or hold on to a job. Showing up for time, being respectful, all of those kinds of things that we take for granted, but that if you don't get them right, you're not going to last long. So, thank you, Rick. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Does the new homeowner have to pay real estate taxes?
Yes, they pick all of that up, unless they're in an area where that's been abated. And we do have a few of those.
How does the county determine the value of the home?
They appraise it just like they would appraise any other home.
Yes, you certainly know your business better than any of us. Recently, I went to my Dublin granddaughter's basketball game at Bishop Reedy. I left downtown, went out Mound, came back in Sullivan. I've lived here 53 years, and I said it looked to me like the city of Columbus is abandoned the hilltop. Would it be, have you thought about going to the city and saying, next year we want to do 22 houses in the hilltop? The following year we want to do 22 houses in the south end. I mean, is there anything logical about that?
It's absolutely logical, and it is part of our strategic plan. We have built out in the hilltop. In fact, once the moratorium was lifted in the Franklinton area, we were the first developer to go in there in 44 years and build a house. So we tend to move around in pockets. We're up in Linden now. We're concentrating in the south end, both of those areas for the next few years. As you can imagine, there's a a certain economy of scale in being able to build a number of houses in the same neighborhood. It's not very efficient to have a house here and a house there and so forth. So.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I saw your houses in German Village. You seem to be focusing on building to the character of the neighborhood. How much of that is intentional? How much of that is kind of forced on you by the community associations?
And your check is in the mail too. Seriously, years ago, before I elected to the House, I was on the Clintonville Area Commission, and you learn firsthand that when somebody's going to add something onto their garage, that their next door neighbor is out there with a micrometer trying to figure out if they're in the setback. All right, and then they come to the commission to complain. So people are very, very interested in what's going on in their neighborhood, and they don't want something that doesn't look like their neighborhood. It's human nature. It's you know, you're trying to protect the value of the homes that are there. So we are very intentional about that. We do work a lot with the civic associations and community groups because it's good business. You don't want to do something where they resent you coming in. Yeah, you can elbow your way in and say, you know, we're the big cheese and we got the money and you got a lot here and we're just going to plop down what we want. I'm part of the Wineland Park Collaborative, and years ago when we started building in Wineland Park, we had some very, very sharp people there who knew something about architecture, and boy, they came to those community meetings wondering why the pitch of the roof wasn't just a little bit higher, because that's what it was down the street. So we went back to the drawing board and changed our plans in order to accommodate that. Well, the goodwill that you get, there's a cost to that, of course, but the goodwill that you get from approaching the neighborhoods in which you work in that way pay huge dividends. They're expecting you, some of these neighborhoods are expecting you to come in with your thumbs under your lapel, like they've seen groups come in before and say, well, you know what's best for you. That dog doesn't hunt very well, because sometimes those groups come in, they get a grant to do some sort of a study, they make a bunch of hubbub, the grant ends up being spent, the study sits on a shelf gathering dust, and the area residents are going, what the heck happened here? Because nothing's changed. And so our goal is to go in, and as opposed to saying, okay, we're the know-it-alls as the hub and the wheel, we say, that's not where we're coming from. We're a spoke. We'd like to help facilitate some changes in this area, but we need you all to be involved. We want that community association to be involved. We want your input on the housing designs that are going to be coming in here, because they're going to be here a long time. Why? Because we don't build a Dr. Seuss house. It's going to stand up there a while.
Thank you, EJ.
Oh, I thought that was applause for just that point. Okay.
I think you made a number of great points. Thank you so much.
You were much more entertaining than so many of our speakers. You'll have to come back again soon. And to entice you, we would love to present you with this gift, which is a donation to Rotary International in your honor.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Were you standing behind me the whole time?
No, I just stood up. Trust me, you would have known if I was standing. I would have tinged the bell, you know. Okay. All right. It was a great meeting. Thank you for all your questions. And thanks to the program committee for continuing to bring us these really interesting speakers. Next week's speaker will be Greg Bixler of Design Outreach to discuss life-sustaining technology for people in developing countries. That sounds interesting. So we'll see you back here next week. And until then, be a Rotarian all week long.